In the tumultuous year of 1944, as World War II raged across Europe, the Allied forces faced an immense challenge. Every strategic move was met with fierce resistance. And the battlefields demanded not just strength, but unparalleled cunning. Victory hinged on intelligence, on outsmarting an enemy who seemed to anticipate every conventional attack. Commanders huddled in dimly lit tents, poring over maps, searching for an edge, a way to deceive their adversaries on an unprecedented scale. The conventional armies battled fiercely on the front lines, but a different kind of war was brewing in the shadows, a war of illusions, where art, sound, and deception would become the most potent weapons against the formidable Nazi war machine. This was the untold story of the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops, a unit so shrouded in secrecy that its very existence remained classified for decades. Their mission? To mimic the presence of much larger forces, diverting enemy attention and resources. Comprising artists, engineers, and sound experts, this unique group transformed the art of illusion into a powerful military strategy. They were the masters of disguise, creating elaborate deceptions right under the enemy's nose, without firing a single shot. Known today as the Ghost Army, their story is a testament to the fact that in warfare, the mind can be as potent a weapon as any gun or tank. They prove that sometimes the greatest battles are won not with bullets, but with brilliant bluffs. The need for such a unit became desperately clear after the D-Day landings. The Allies needed a way to keep the Germans guessing, to stretch their defensive lines thin across France. The answer was the creation of the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops, but this was no ordinary recruitment. The Army didn't just look for soldiers. They actively sought out artists, illustrators, and advertising designers from New York art schools, men whose creativity was their greatest weapon. Alongside the artists, they recruited sound engineers, auditory wizards who understood how to manipulate sound, to make a few trucks sound like an entire armored division, or to mimic the sounds of a bridge being built in the dead of night. These unconventional recruits, actors, architects, and radio operators were brought together under a shroud of absolute secrecy. They were tasked with creating a traveling roadshow of deception, a phantom army designed to mislead the entire German Wehrmacht.
Don't miss our incredible war stories. Subscribe for more. And for the full mission, watch the full video on our channel, link in the description.
Their first, and perhaps most audacious tool of deception was visual. The unit was equipped with hundreds of full-scale, inflatable rubber replicas of tanks, cannons, and trucks. They could create the illusion of a massive armored division appearing overnight. These weren't just simple balloons. They were meticulously crafted illusions, weighing only 90 pounds each. A small team of men could assemble an entire battalion of tanks in just a few hours, using nothing but air compressors. With a loud hiss, the pumps would roar to life. What was moments ago a flat pile of rubber on the ground would begin to twist and rise, slowly taking the shape of a formidable M4 Sherman tank. The illusion was astonishingly effective. From the air, or even from a short distance, these rubber decoys were indistinguishable from the real steel machines of war, creating a terrifying, albeit phantom, armored presence. But a tank standing alone wasn't enough. To complete the deception, the Ghost Army soldiers would add the finishing touches, creating a scene of recent military activity to fool prying enemy spy planes. To further enhance the realism, the soldiers would drape large camouflage nets over the rubber armor. This simple addition not only helped the decoys blend into the environment, but also obscured their artificial nature from reconnaissance pilots. The most ingenious detail, however, was the tracks. The Ghost Army used tractors or modified vehicles to press fake tank tread marks into the dirt roads and fields, creating the unmistakable signature of a heavy armored column that had just passed through. From the sky, the sight was terrifyingly convincing. Rows upon rows of camouflaged tanks, complete with realistic ground tracks, waited in staging areas, appearing as a formidable invasion force ready to strike at any moment. The illusion wasn't just visual, it was theatrical. Soldiers would deliberately hang laundry between the rubber tanks or create fake campfires, staging a performance for any German scouts who might be watching from a distance. The true genius was in their mobility. An armored division, which would normally take days to move, could be disassembled in minutes. 4 men could simply pick up a 90-pound tank, deflate it, and pack it away. But visual trickery was only half the plan. To truly convince the enemy, the Ghost Army needed to sound the part. They employed a second revolutionary form of deception, sonic warfare. The unit was equipped with massive sound systems mounted on trucks. These systems played high-fidelity recordings of military activity, specially engineered by top sound labs back in the United States. Their sound library was extensive. They had recordings for every scenario: the clatter of tank treads, the shouts of bridge-building crews, and the rumble of approaching infantry divisions. Each sound was a bullet in their auditory arsenal. These speaker trucks would be positioned under the cover of darkness. Their massive horns, hidden in forests or barns, were ready to unleash a deafening symphony of war, simulating the noise of a 30,000-man army. In the dead of night, a single operator would flip a switch. Suddenly, the silence of the French countryside was shattered by the overwhelming, deafening roar of an entire armored division on the move, broadcast at full volume. The sound was so powerful, it could be heard up to 15 miles away. The recordings were engineered to be multi-layered, creating a 3D sound effect that fooled even the most experienced enemy sound rangers. But visual and sonic deception weren't enough. The Ghost Army added a third crucial layer, spoof radio. They mimicked the radio traffic of real army units, transmitting false messages to confuse German intelligence. These weren't random signals. The operators were skilled mimics. They studied the distinct fist, the unique tapping style, of real Allied radio operators and replicated them perfectly, making the fake transmissions indistinguishable from the real ones. On the other side, German listening posts would intercept this flurry of activity. Their radio operators, tuning their dials, would pick up what they believed to be the communications of a massive force, gathering for an imminent attack. These false signals were carefully crafted to feed the enemy's worst fears. They would hint at unit movements, supply requests, and attack preparations, all pointing to a location far from the actual Allied objective. The combination of phantom tanks, blistering sound, and fake radio traffic was devastatingly effective. German high command, convinced a massive assault was imminent, began to react just as the Allies had hoped. Entire panzer divisions, precious fuel, and thousands of troops were diverted away from the real battlefields. They were sent on a wild goose chase, racing to intercept an army that simply wasn't there. This crucial diversion left the actual Allied targets miles away, dangerously exposed. The real front line, where the main assault was planned, was now thinly defended thanks to an army of artists and engineers. With the German defenses weakened and misdirected, the real Allied forces, including General Patton's Third Army, could advance with far less resistance. The path for their operations was paved by this elaborate phantom menace. One of their most critical missions was Operation Viersen. The Ghost Army simulated 2 entire divisions preparing to cross the Rhine River, drawing the German defenders to the wrong location, while the real crossing happened miles away, almost unopposed. After each successful deception, the Ghost Army would vanish as quickly as it had appeared. Their phantom tanks would be deflated, their speakers packed, and their radio signals would go silent, leaving the Germans bewildered. The sound equipment itself was state-of-the-art for its time. Heavy turntables and delicate vacuum tubes were transported in specially modified trucks, representing a fragile yet immensely powerful arsenal. The engineers didn't just play sounds, they performed them. They would fade sounds in and out, simulating the approach and departure of columns, making the audio illusion terrifyingly three-dimensional for enemy listeners. The radio deception was just as detailed. Operators would even simulate downtime and chatter, the normal, boring radio traffic of a real unit, to make their presence absolutely convincing 24 hours a day. To complete the illusion of a major headquarters, the unit even had inflatable dummy airplanes. These were placed on fake airfields to convince German reconnaissance that a major general and his command staff were present. The placement of these decoys was a precise science. The artists in the unit understood perspective, using the terrain to their advantage. They would place tanks partially hidden in tree lines, exactly as a real tank commander would. Even smaller vehicles like jeeps were replicated. These inflatable decoys, weighing almost nothing, could be scattered around a fake headquarters to create the impression of a large, bustling command post. The sound engineers had a vast library of custom-made records. Each one contained a different element of war, not just tanks, but the distinct sounds of different types of artillery, or the metallic clank of engineering crews at work. These sounds preyed on the minds of German soldiers. Imagine lying in a dark trench, hearing what sounds like hundreds of tanks approaching your position. The psychological terror was as effective as any real weapon. The radio deception required a significant footprint. The Ghost Army teams would rapidly deploy large, complex antenna arrays, often in open fields, ensuring their spoof signals were powerful enough to be intercepted by distant German listening posts. German radio operators, meticulously scanning the airwaves, would suddenly detect this surge of new professional-sounding traffic. They would log the call signs and message types, unknowingly feeding false intelligence directly to their commanders. The performance went beyond props. The Ghost Army had actors in their ranks who would impersonate different officers. They would even set up fake military police checkpoints, complete with divisional patches from the real units they were imitating. To signal the presence of a high-ranking general, the unit would boldly fly the general's 2-star flag over a designated headquarters tent. This was a critical signal for enemy reconnaissance, confirming a major command post was active. The effect of these theatrics was immediate. German reconnaissance planes flying high overhead would spot these telltale signs, the tanks, the artillery, the general's flag, and report a massive buildup. The deception even extended to human intelligence. Ghost army soldiers dressed in the uniforms of the real division they were imitating would deliberately visit nearby French towns to accidentally spread false rumors about their unit's attack plans. After a night of sonic bombardment, the Ghost Army would fall silent. This sudden, eerie quiet was just as unsettling for the enemy, leaving them to wonder when and where the massive force they had heard would finally strike. The logistics of this deception were staggering. The unit's trucks were in constant motion, moving the fake tanks and speakers from one location to another, often under the cover of night, to simulate the rapid movement of a real army. The result of this multimedia assault was total confusion for the German commanders. Their intelligence reports were contradictory. One report from radio intercepts would show a division here. Another, from aerial photos, would show it somewhere else. While the Germans hesitated, trying to figure out which threat was real, the actual Allied offensives struck. The Ghost Army's mission was to hold enemy reserves in place, and by creating phantom threats, they succeeded perfectly. These rubber decoys were surprisingly fragile. They were susceptible to shrapnel and even stray bullets, requiring a dedicated team of mechanics who would race to patch up the wounded tanks, often using simple rubber glue and canvas patches. The sonic deception wasn't just machines. The library also included recordings of human chaos, soldiers shouting commands, the clang of hammers on metal, and even the casual chatter of troops at rest, all designed to build a complete, convincing auditory picture. For the Germans, discovering the deception was a humiliating experience. Advancing patrols, expecting to fight a division, would find only abandoned fields, deflated rubber, and the lingering echo of a phantom army. The sheer scale of their inventory was immense. The unit carried over 1,300 inflatable decoys, allowing them to simulate multiple divisions at the same time, or to create a vast, sprawling ghost front line that stretched for miles. These sonic missions were incredibly dangerous. The speaker trucks had to operate close to the front lines to be heard. Their deafening broadcasts often drew heavy German artillery fire, forcing the crews to complete their show while under direct attack. The radio operators were true masters of their craft. They didn't just send noise. They created complex overlapping networks of signals. They would impersonate low-level infantry radio chatter, mid-level command orders, and high-level divisional reports all at once. Most of their work was done under the absolute cover of darkness. Teams of soldiers would move silently through the night, inflating their phantom army, positioning speakers and setting up antennas, all before the first light of dawn. The next morning, German pilots on reconnaissance flights would take photographs. The developed images would confirm their worst fears. A massive Allied force had appeared overnight, exactly where the Ghost Army wanted them to look. Confronted with this proof, the photos, the radio intercepts, and the eyewitness sound reports, German commanders had no choice but to react. Orders were rapidly drawn up to move vital reserves and artillery to counter the non-existent threat. And so, as German forces rushed to fight shadows, the real Allied operations would begin. Miles away, the true assault force would advance against a front line that was now critically undermanned, all thanks to the Phantom Army. The success was often immediate and decisive. At the Battle of the Bulge, the Ghost Army's simulations helped hold a dangerously thin part of the American line, fooling the Germans into believing it was heavily reinforced. Once the real attack was underway, the Ghost Army's mission was complete. The signal was given to vanish. This was as critical as the deception itself, as they had to disappear before the enemy realized they'd been fooled. Within hours, an area that had simulated the activity of 30,000 men would be completely deserted. The inflatable tanks would be packed, the speakers silenced, and the trucks would be on the road, moving to their next secret assignment. The German patrols that eventually arrived would find nothing. Just empty fields, confusing tracks, and perhaps a single discarded rubber patch, a baffling clue to the massive army that had simply vanished into thin air. The actors in the unit were meticulous. They would drive to local cafes, order drinks, and loudly discuss their fake unit's strength and fake attack plans, knowing that local spies and sympathizers would overhear and report the false information. Even the dirt on the fake tanks was art. The artists would skillfully spray paint patches of mud and grease onto the rubber decoys, perfectly mimicking the wear and tear of a real tank that had seen heavy action. This level of secrecy meant a life of isolation. The soldiers of the 23rd were forbidden from writing home about what they did. Their letters were heavily censored, and they couldn't even tell their fellow soldiers in other units about their true mission. They were a nomadic tribe, constantly on the move. Their unofficial motto captured their mission perfectly. We make 'em see what we want 'em to see, and we make 'em hear what we want 'em to hear. When the war in Europe finally ended, the Ghost Army's mission was over. But their secrecy was paramount. The soldiers were ordered to destroy the evidence of their operations, the fake documents, the plans, and the artwork. The unit was disbanded. The men were sworn to silence. Their unique shoulder patch, the ghost insignia, was ordered to be removed from their uniforms. They were to return to civilian life, as if the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops had never existed. For more than 40 years, the story of the Ghost Army remained one of the military's most closely guarded secrets. The veterans returned to their lives as artists and designers, unable to speak of their vital, life-saving contributions to the war. It was not until 1996 that the mission was finally declassified. Only then did the world begin to learn of the Phantom Army that had bluffed its way to victory, using imagination as their primary weapon. Historians now estimate that the Ghost Army's deceptions, which misled German forces over 20 times, saved between 15 and 30,000 American lives. Their stage show had very real life-or-death consequences on the battlefield. These men, who had joined the army to fight, ended up using their most unexpected talents. They wielded paintbrushes instead of rifles, and sound mixers instead of mortars, proving that creativity is a profound strategic asset. In 2022, long after most of the unit's members had passed away, the United States government awarded the Ghost Army the Congressional Gold Medal, a final, long-overdue recognition of their silent, ingenious victory. The story of the Ghost Army remains a powerful lesson that in the darkest of conflicts, sometimes the most effective weapon isn't brute force, but the brilliance of the human mind and the courage to fight a war unlike any ever fought before.
Don't miss our incredible war stories. Subscribe for more. And for the full mission, watch the full video on our channel, link in the description.